Are you winning, son?
It's time for a little story about weebs. But before I dive into the rabbit hole of anime and waifu pillows, let's start with the basics, shall we? What is a weeb? Weeb is short for weeaboo, and it's used to describe a non-Japanese person who is obsessed with Japanese culture. Now, to understand where weebs came from, we have to go back in time, even further than the floppy drive. And I know, that is very far. We're going back all the way to the 18th century. This is when Japan became more open to international trade. And people from Europe were introduced to Japanese flora, artworks, and just the culture in general. And for many people, this culture and art was mind-blowing. This is where the word Japanophile originated. It was a term to describe people who loved the Japanese culture. And just in case you're curious, yes, the opposite, Japanophobia, definitely exists. This is basically when you're scared of anything, well, Japanese. I guess you could say that the European people of the 18th century were the first weebs. But then how did we go from a fancy term like Japanophile to something so simple as weeb? Well, to understand that, we have to look at this comic made by Nicholas Gurwitch.
If we waste any more time on weeaboo, we'll be bankrupt by the end of the month.
Did someone just say weeaboo? 'Cause I think I just heard someone say weeaboo.
We are boo-boo. We are boo-boo. We are boo.
Nicholas and some of his fellow artists were quite active on a forum called 4chan. 4chan is an anonymous image board. It's basically just a normal forum, except that everyone is anonymous. I think we can all agree that in some cases, being anonymous can be great. However, on the internet, it sometimes brings out the worst in people. On 4chan, the word Japanese was used to insult people who were obsessed with Japanese culture but were not of Japanese origin. Japanese meaning wannabe Japanese. At some point, the insults just kept growing and growing, and the moderators of 4chan finally had enough, and they decided to do something. They came up with a crazy plan that everywhere on the forum, the word Japanese would be changed to weeaboo, which was just a harmless and funny word without any meaning. However, people loved it, and the word caught on. And around 2005, people were using weeaboo as a full-on replacement for the old Japanese. Weeb, the shortened version of weeaboo, only got popular way later. It started appearing on Twitter in 2010, in Urban Dictionary in 2011, and in 4chan archives in 2012. After that, it starts taking off and completely overtakes weeaboo by 2018. It's also very important to mention that at this point in time, the term has been more or less reclaimed by the people to whom it was originally meant as an insult. And nowadays, it's gaining more usage by fans of Japanese culture, referring to themselves in an ironic way. So that was a quick history lesson about the origins of the word. Now, let's take a closer look at weeb culture. This is arguably what a balanced and healthy life looks like for most people. Healthy eating, a healthy body, healthy connection, and finally, a healthy mind. Personally, I'd like to sneak in some burgers near the top, but don't tell anyone. Achieving this will apparently grant you enlightenment and you'll live happily ever after. Now, allegedly, according to multiple very trustworthy sources on the internet, this is what the life of an average weeb looks like. It consists of anime, manga, and video games, dressing up like anime characters, and worshipping Japan without actually knowing anything about it. Achieving this will grant you ultimate weeb powers and infinite waifus. Okay, I might have exaggerated that just a tiny bit, but there is a truth to it. Anime and manga are huge parts of Japanese culture. In fact, they may be the biggest cultural export of Japan ever. Anime is a style of animation that is typical to Japan. It's fundamentally characterized by the use of limited animation, the suspension of time, a complex narrative, and a very recognizable art style where characters have large oval eyes. As you can see on the background, I'm not really meant to be an anime artist. I'll leave that to the professionals. Since the 90s, Pokémon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Dragon Ball Z completely took over the Western world. They became household names for every family and every kid. And I guess I'm the living proof of that. I wouldn't consider myself a weeb. I'm not drawn to Japanese culture, I don't watch anime, and I don't have a thick thighs save life sticker on my car. But I still grew up watching all of these shows. I collected Pokemon cards, I played the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, and of course I practiced my Kamehamehas whenever I was in the shower. So the influence of anime is gigantic. And I gotta mention that it's not just for kids. Series like Attack on Titan, Death Note, and Cowboy Bebop are very popular among adults. In fact, they were made for adults, featuring complex plotlines and full character arcs. It is estimated that over 60% of all animated shows worldwide originate from Japan. And over the years, its audience only kept growing bigger and bigger. Not just in Japan, but all over the world. Which brings us to the other side of the earth. America's Anime Expo draws in over 100,000 anime enthusiasts every year, and a lot of them dress up as their favorite anime character. This is called cosplay, and it's another big thing in weeb culture. Cosplaying is when someone dresses up as a character or a concept, and sometimes people who are considered weebs will dress up as their favorite anime characters. Of course, you can dress up where and whenever you like, but most cosplaying as we know today will happen at anime or comic conventions. And I know what you're thinking, isn't cosplay just for super nerdy weebs? Well, no! Cosplaying has been gaining a lot of popularity, and yes, earlier it maybe was considered a little bit less cool, but nowadays more and more people are getting into cosplay. And this is the section where I was gonna list some of those famous cosplayers, but instead I found something more interesting. It seems that the cosplaying community is heavily divided in two sides. On one side you have, let's call them the OGs, people who really consider cosplaying as a form of art and love for the characters that they portray. And on the other side, you have a maybe more modern and newer generation of cosplayers who dress up in more revealing outfits in order to feel sexy and confident. A quick Google search for most famous cosplayer will almost always point you to Jessica Nigri. She won multiple cosplaying awards and was even an official spokesperson in several video games. She is definitely a controversial topic in the community though. Some people think that she puts cosplayers in a bad light by wearing too revealing outfits, but others absolutely love her. I'm not here to pick sides, I'm just here to throw out the information. Regardless of what you think, Jessica's popularity did bring cosplaying to a much wider audience. But let's get back to the main question. So where did weebs eventually come from? Well, I guess you could say it's really only natural for people to be curious about other cultures. After all, humans are a curious species. Curiosity was the reason Isaac Newton wanted to know what made an apple fall from its tree. And the same curiosity was also the reason that the European people in the 18th century were so interested in Japanese culture. The incredible reach of anime in the 90s and the introduction of the internet brought fans together. And with 4chan as a catalyst, the word weeb was defined and born. Nowadays, hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world celebrate being a weeb, and it really has become a substantial part of Western culture. I guess deep down inside, we all have a little piece of weeb.